Hi guys, it's me Chaz HD and welcome to the 2023 Miami Grand Prix weekend. I hope you guys are all well after the, very boring, to be honest, Azerbaijan Grand Prix weekend we had last weekend was, I think the Baku track, to be honest, is pretty overrated. I think we only really can get good races around there when we have pure chaos. It's either a terrible race or just pure chaos, which makes things exciting. So, yeah, obviously not getting the chaos meant we were not going to have a good race, and it was just really pretty terrible. But obviously we're here for the first of three races in the United States of America here in Miami in the early part of May. Of course, the other two races in America quite far down the road in 2023. And of course, in tonight's preview, I'll be getting into how I expect the pecking order to look around this track, because obviously this track does have different type of characteristics compared to the Baku track. I'll get into my predictions for qualifying on the race and go through the teams as always, and get a bit more in depth as to how I think they'll do this weekend in Miami. Now, what I want to start the stream with is something a bit different from what I normally start my previews with. Because, obviously, this weekend preview happening right now is happening on a Friday night, where normally I would do this on a Thursday night, and practice one has actually just finished in Miami. And of course, a bit of a weird timing or scheduling for this preview than it would be normally. Now, don't worry, nothing as bad has happened that's caused me to adjust the schedule for this weekend, and I will get a bit more into the schedule for content for this weekend in a few moments' time. But basically, and you guys in the comments and in the live chat, let me know whether you agree or disagree with some of the stuff I'm going to be saying in the next few minutes, and just let me know how you feel. But the reason I have, to a degree, cut my content down for this weekend's Miami Grand Prix is because, and this has been happening for quite a few months, my interest in Formula One is really starting to wane. It's really starting to suffer. If we look at this season so far, the field itself, I know obviously Red Bull are, miles out in front. And I just want to clarify, the reason my interest is waning in Formula One is not because Red Bull are dominating. When I got into Formula One, Red Bull were dominating. It didn't stop me from watching F1. My interest was still, very large in Formula One in general. So Red Bull dominating is not an issue for me. The field behind Red Bull is still very close. So, there are still interesting things to talk about in regards to that. But as a whole, the sport at the minute is just right now it's just shit. That's just my honest opinions on just where Formula One is right now. It's just not very enjoyable. I mean, if we look at the quality of the races so far this season, Bahrain was underwhelming considering what we have had in the past. Saudi Arabia was underwhelming. Obviously, the safety car didn't help. I think safety car definitely made that race quite a bit worse than it was going to be. Australia was good. I think really we got the best race we could realistically around that track. And then Baku. The problem with Baku, it wasn't just that the race was bad. It was also because it was a sprint weekend. And the sprint race, the new sprint format in general, just didn't make things any more exciting or interesting. Even if you're a newbie to Formula One, it didn't make things any more interesting. And practice one, I think I even may have said this during the race watch along for Baku, practice one in Baku was probably just as entertaining, if not more entertaining, than the sprint race itself. And arguably, at times, the race on Sunday. That's how bad Baku was. It wasn't just the race on the Sunday. It was the entire weekend was terrible. It was so bad. The only highlight for me really was the fight in Q3 on the Friday between Leclerc and Verstappen for pole position. Other than that, couldn't really give a fuck about the rest of the Baku weekend, to be honest. It just wasn't very exciting at all and was just a really bad weekend. And as I said, with Baku, you can only get good races around there if you have a race like 2017 or 2018 or 2021 where chaos happens. If that doesn't happen, you're just going to get a boring procession because the Baku track is not very good. I mean, the only reason we race there is purely because chaos is likely to happen around that type of track. That's really why, again, we race there. But yeah, so far this season, the racing just hasn't been very good. The season so far has been average at best, really. And then, even though, excluding Red Bull, the field with Mercedes, Aston Martin, Ferrari, the fight there's pretty close, and then you've got a close fight in the midfield. That's fine, but I think this also goes back to the back half of 2022. Formula One races at the moment just don't feel anywhere near as exciting as they did even 2 years ago, never mind 10 years ago when I started to properly get into Formula One, or just over 10 years ago when I started to properly get into Formula One. They're just not doing it for me at the minute. I mean, that's not to say at the back end of last season we didn't have good races. There were a couple really good ones. The one in Brazil I thought was very good. The US one was good. And maybe you could say the Dutch race as well. Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort was good, but really the second half of the season was quite tame, and then it's really just continued that type of tame end, and just led into a really tame start to 2023. And of course, this weekend we're racing in Miami at a track that is unbelievably shit, and I you guys might disagree with that, but I think it is. I think it's a terrible track. The first sector is decent. It's got a decent flow to it. The middle sector is terrible. The slow corners are horrendous as far as I'm concerned. They're painful to watch cars go through. And then the final sector is just so boring. Just one long straight and then a hairpin basically, and then you exit onto the start-finish straight. It's just a terribly boring track. And even because sometimes with street circuits you can get like really exciting qualifyings. I mean, we have seen it with Baku. Even last weekend, the Friday qualifying was decent at least. But even with this track, qualifying is not amazingly exciting. So my thoughts going into this weekend, I gotta be honest, are pretty pessimistic. I don't think we're going to have a great weekend. I think the highlight really this weekend is going to be qualifying. And unless something crazy happens in the race, and the only crazy thing I could think of that could happen that could actually lead to a good or great race, is rain, which could happen at any moment in Florida. It is a known thing that the weather is quite unpredictable in that part of the world and in that part of America as well. So, maybe we will get some rain and it'll cause us to have an amazing Miami Grand Prix. I really hope it does, but if that doesn't happen, I think we're just going to have a pretty boring weekend around a track that has no character really, and also at a race venue that, no disrespect, doesn't really have any atmosphere and only serves to attract influencers and famous people. So I'm not very excited at all for this weekend's race. And yeah, my excitement for Formula One is absolutely down at the minute. It really is. And you know, a lot of why my interest is starting to wane in Formula One. Not Formula One in general, like all. My interest is waning in Formula One in terms of what it is right now, is what I need to be clear with what I'm saying here. I still love the Formula One that I got into, you know, back in like 2011, 2012. And I love going back and watching old races and that. The Formula One I'm losing interest in at the minute is the current one, the current Formula One we have, which just feels soulless, lifeless, sterile. It just doesn't feel exciting at the minute. And Liberty Media have done a lot to contribute to that. They really, really have. Obviously, sprint races have been a terrible thing added to Formula One, which have made race weekends, for me, less enjoyable. And have made the races on the Sunday not as enjoyable as they could have been if we did not have a sprint. And it's only going to get worse. And it's not just sprint races, which are my problem with Formula One at the minute. It's a lot of things. You know, the tyres we have, in terms of the way they operate, are just not good enough. They don't provide us with interesting. You know, they don't provide us with interesting scenarios, maybe you could say, in terms of teams maybe going for different strategies and stuff like that. F1 pretty much seems to have the same tyre wear, except a couple teams on the grid. I mean, we saw that in Baku, that even Ocon and Hulkenberg, who had like 10 lap older tyres, easily could stay ahead of the pack behind them for a very long time, because there wasn't really any difference with the difference in the tyres, and the tyres were just you know, didn't help at all with the excitement of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. You know, that's an issue I have. I don't think the tyres and the way they operate, they offer exciting alternatives in terms of maybe certain teams going for a 2-stop, certain teams going for a 1-stop, or even certain teams going for a 3-stop compared to a 2-stop. When, you know, just over 10 years ago, you would get these interesting alterations in strategy because of the way the tyres were and how each team, you know, it impacted each team differently. But with the current F1, it just doesn't. It doesn't really. There isn't really a difference, a massive difference between all of the teams in terms of strategy, and it doesn't make things from that aspect. An aspect I do enjoy quite a bit, race strategy, as I've said over the past few years. I do enjoy that side of Formula One, but at the minute, it's not very enjoyable. The cars itself, I think, are way too heavy and way too big. And they're just massive logs that are being dragged around the track every weekend. They should be a lot lighter and a lot smaller, and they would enable for better racing and enable the drivers to push harder and make things just better. Yeah, there's just many things that I think are wrong with F1 at the minute, and it's not just what's wrong right now. These have been issues for years. You know, the size of the cars and them being too heavy, the tyres. Obviously, we've had sprint races now for a couple years. And I'm sure there's other things that maybe you guys will mention that I haven't even got into. And please let me know in the chat or the comments. What things in Formula One at the minute do you really not like that, you know, should be really worked on to just make things better? But I think one big issue that I have, which kind of comes back down to the whole sprint race thing, is Liberty Media And I've talked at length about what they're trying to do with Formula One. They're trying to, increase the value of Formula One as much as they can, so they can sell it for a much higher price than they bought it for. What was it? 7 years ago, nearly, they bought it from whoever. I can't remember the exact company it was called before, but basically bought it from Bernie Ecclestone, who was, running the show. Liberty Media, the way they run F1, they try to introduce things in a very rushed way to try, in the best way they can, make things more entertaining, when the things they introduce just don't make things more entertaining. They just really don't, such as sprint races. Obviously, at Imola, the next race in 2 weeks' time, we're going to have this new qualifying tyre thing that's going to be tested, where in Q1, they'll only be allowed to use hard tyres. Then in Q2, they'll only be allowed to use the medium tyres. Then in Q3, they'll only be allowed to use soft tyres. Just stupid shit to try and make things a bit more exciting. And it really pisses me off, because, and I've thought about this today, not just with Formula One, motorsport, and just sport in general, but the reason we're interested in Formula One, and maybe other sports that maybe you guys will be interested in. I mean, there's other sports I'm interested in, such as like football, tennis, along with F1. The reason I'm interested in those things is because they are naturally exciting to me and interesting. And that's why, at the end of the day, these type of sports are so popular, because they were originally, and for a long time, were naturally exciting. Not just to participate in, but to watch as a fan. We don't need new, ridiculous things being brought in to make things more entertaining and maybe get a slight increase on viewership. These sports that we love, and obviously Formula One being one of them, we love because it is naturally exciting to us. We don't need these bullshit things to make it exciting, such as a sprint race. So that's why, if you just leave Formula One alone and let, what do you call it? If you just allow the format to be what worked, which is, having 2, maybe 3 practice sessions and then a normal qualifying session and a normal race, Formula One will be just fine. There are much bigger issues at play than the format, obviously, of a Grand Prix weekend. Even worse news, though, in relation to sprint races and that, was something I saw earlier today. And by the way, when it comes to practice 1 and the results of practice 1, I will show it on screen soon. I just want to finish up really what I'm talking about here to start the stream. Let me just find it quickly, if I can, and get it up on screen. You guys can see it. And here we go. So, and this Twitter account, Formula Race, is very reliable. They report reliable news, and this news has only been confirmed by one of, I think, one journalist. Later on today, it was confirmed a bit more that this is probably, the case. Liberty Media reportedly wants F1 to have 10 sprint race weekends in 2024, which would be almost half of the F1 season being a sprint race weekend. Because, and the reason they want this is because they just want to appeal to the people that don't watch Formula One, or maybe have in the past and have like a, maybe a slight interest in it at certain points. This is not aimed towards the actual fans of Formula One. It's not aimed at them at all. And, this it's just a real kick in the teeth, honestly, especially for, again, my interest in Formula One, because, and I'll just go back to these pictures that I was showing earlier, because I've talked about it at length. The sprint races, they don't make things any more exciting. All they do is, you know, you might get a slight bit of excitement on the first lap, but really what the sprint race does is it gives you a preview of what's going to happen in the race on the Sunday, unless, of course, the weather conditions are massively different. That's all it does. It gives you a preview for an actual preview for the race, and ruins the race. I mean, there has been good races, very good races after a sprint race. Yeah, sorry, since you know, they've been brought on board, but if we didn't have the sprint race there to show us what the actual pace was looking like from all the teams, then it would have made those races even more exciting not being in the know. And that's a big reason why Formula One races a lot of the times are exciting, because things will happen that we weren't expecting. But if we have a sprint race and then something shows itself in the sprint race that we didn't expect, then we're going to expect it in the race itself on the Sunday, and then it ends up happening, and then we're, you know, it just doesn't make things as exciting. And just the thought of 10 sprint race weekends in an F1 season is sickening to me. It really, really is. I mean, 3 sprint races was probably the absolute limit I could handle, but I mean 6 at the minute is just way too much for me. But 10, it just gets to the point where it's just ruining, for me, just ruining my enjoyment of Formula One. Really, really is. And like I said, it's not going to get any better, because Formula One and Liberty Media, they are purely aiming their decisions towards people that don't watch Formula One, or the newer viewers who, you know, don't quite understand what, I guess, motorsport should be, or, you know, what the core principles should be in terms of the rules and that, and the format and the way things work. And of course, I'm not against new F1 fans. Everyone was a new F1 fan, you know, once. I'm not against them at all. As long as they, you know, actually try to learn about F1 and get genned up to a decent degree and respect, you know, the people that have risked their lives, you know, racing in Formula One. I don't mind if we have loads of new people to Formula One, but essentially what Liberty Media is doing is something similar to what happened, and maybe some Americans, if they are in chat, will maybe remember or know of this. What they're doing is similar to what happened in NASCAR like 10, 20 years ago, where NASCAR, when it was really popular in America, and it was really popular, by the way, they started to drive away their hardcore base of fans, and it got to the point where their hardcore base of fans just really disappeared in a big way. There's a great video by Urinating Tree on NASCAR's downfall, done in 2017, I think it is. The reason I mentioned him, Urinating Tree, is because he is my favourite YouTube channel. And yeah, I just love the guy so much. His content is definitely a big inspiration for me. But yeah, he did a video about, you know, the downfall really of NASCAR. And if you watch it, you'll see or hear the echoes really of what's going on right now in Formula One, where Liberty Media are just taking F1 away from what us hardcore F1 fans loved about Formula One, and they're essentially driving us away. And for NASCAR, it didn't end well. They, you know, dropped massively with their popularity, and NASCAR, I don't think, will ever be as popular as it was. I can't remember exactly when NASCAR's popularity was at its best, but there'll never be NASCAR as popular as they were, say, 20, 25 years ago, because they just made it ridiculous. And that's the same thing that's happening to Formula One. It's being turned more into a purely for entertainment type of thing, rather than it sticking to its core principles and, you know, naturally just being good, which obviously it was in the past. Notice saying NASCAR ratings peaked in 2005. Yeah, I think it was around then when it really started to, you know, the beginning of the end started to come for NASCAR. Yeah, I do recommend that video by Urinating Tree, because again, if you watch it, you'll see similarities to what's happening now in Formula One, and it's really a scary vision of how things will go with Formula One if Liberty Media continues to direct their I don't know how you would describe it, PR or whatever, towards a certain group. And if they keep making the decisions they're making, then they're just going to drive away the base of fans that have been around for so long. I will get to your comments, by the way, in the chat, because I know you guys have got plenty of things to say. Let's see, plenty of comments from you guys. There was also another thing I wanted to show, and I did a quote tweet of it on Twitter. Let me just quickly show it. And it's me quote tweeting a tweet from Karun Chandhok, who's not been the most popular man on Twitter in the last few days. So you can see here my wonderful contribution there. This was the tweet I was quote tweeting, and Karun was quote tweeting another tweet from Motorsport Magazine. And this tweet from Motorsport Magazine, by the way, is just pure insanity, where they say, is it time for radical change, forcing drivers to race for every team in a single season? Anyone who suggests that should be took away by white coats, as far as I'm concerned. Karun, though, goes on to say, can't see it ever happening at every race, but Crofty had a great idea, a one-off non-championship round in Vegas where we have a televised roulette on the previous Sunday and the drivers all get jumbled up, will be the highest watched race of the year, even if there are no points. And that's why I had this response, because as far as I'm concerned, people that come up with such stupid ideas like this, you know, that's what they should do. They should not be really putting these ideas out there, because it's just so stupid. I've not heard of something this stupid in a while, to be honest. It's a sport. What happened to just letting things naturally happen, like I was saying earlier? Why, with these just completely dumb suggestions, a televised roulette, and then a draw basically of, oh, this driver will start in this position, this driver will start in this position. It's just so stupid. So stupid. It's just, again, another small part of why my interest in Formula One, again, is waning. It's just so stupid. Honestly, stuff like that just pisses me off so much. I mean, obviously, if you were to do comparisons with, say, football, when I say football, by the way, I mean soccer. You know, obviously, no one tries to implement, you know, weird rule changes to spice up the action in football, because guess what? Football is exciting. It is naturally exciting, just like motorsport is naturally exciting. Sometimes you get bad football matches where it's boring. Sometimes you get great football matches. But on its own, naturally, football is exciting. Same with Formula One. Formula One, naturally, is exciting. half the time, at least, to a degree. Obviously, not everyone is going to agree with my views of how exciting I find things. But I'd say at least half the time, Formula One is exciting naturally when it's in its most natural element, natural motorsport element. We don't need, all this bullshit to make things maybe more exciting when actually all it does is make things worse, which is what the sprint race has done. And I'm sure more ideas in the future will be not just trialed, but forced in, whether we like it or not. And it will just make things worse, purely just to spice things up. That is what is wrong with Formula One. And I saw this said on Twitter earlier, and it's so true. And you can tell the people that that worry if we have one bad race, you can tell that they're new to Formula One because, and even though I'm newer to Formula One than a lot of people out there that have been watching since the 2000s or the 90s or the 80s or even longer than that, you need to accept with Formula One, even with like football, and even sometimes with tennis, you're going to have bad races, bad football matches, bad tennis matches. You're not going to get absolutely amazing, epic stuff all of the time. That's what makes the great races in F1 even better, is that you don't always have great races all the time. And that obsession has to stop. People need to accept we are going to get bad races. Obviously, you may think I'm being hypocritical because I started this talking about how, the season so far has been pretty boring, and it has. But the issue is, Liberty Media's apparent solutions don't make things any better. They actually make things worse. And that's, again, it gets really to the core of the problem. It just needs to be accepted that not every Formula One race is going to be an 8 out of 10 or better. Again, it's not just Liberty Media that needs to accept this. It's also a lot of the newer fans who are purely looking for entertainment at all costs and don't care about the integrity of Formula One. It just needs to be accepted that, occasionally, even at really good racetracks, we're going to get bad races. We've had bad races in Montreal, for example. At Silverstone, we've had races that were a bit boring. It happens. That's why, we, love Formula One, because it's not a guarantee that every race is going to be exciting. You never know what is going to happen, as the great Murray Walker, I think, used to say. Back when he was commentating. Obviously, rest in peace to him. And yeah, that's my thoughts, essentially. I mean, I basically rambled for, half an hour. But in general, those are my thoughts as to my enjoyment of Formula One at the minute. Like I said, my interest in Formula One is waning. That's not to say that I don't enjoy Formula One anymore. I am still going to cover, the races, qualifying sessions. And I just want, so people don't overreact to what I'm saying, I don't want people to think that I'm going to stop doing content soon. I am still going to do content. It's just, I'm not going to maybe do as much as I originally planned, but I will still be doing, qualifying, race watch-alongs a lot of the time. Maybe not every weekend, but yeah, those are just my thoughts, and I had to just get them out there, really, because I've just been not, in terms of Formula One, I've just not really been in a great mood when I've been thinking about it, to be honest. And when it comes to this Grand Prix this weekend, I'll be honest, I can't really wait until we get past this race and get on to the next one, because I don't anticipate a good race this weekend whatsoever. Anyway, before I come on to your comments in the chat, let me go back to this and just quickly show you the results of practice 1. So it was the Mercedes 1-2. George Russell quickest from Hamilton 2nd, and then Leclerc 3rd, Verstappen 4th, Sainz 5th, Gasly 6th, Alonso 7th, Stroll 8th, Hulkenberg 9th, Ocon 10th, and then Perez, Piastri, Magnussen, Bottas, Albon, Norris, Zhou, Tsunoda, Sargent, and De Vries, the rest of the field. Yeah, let me know in the chat, what are your thoughts on Formula 1 at the minute? And let me know what your interest level is at the minute. Yeah, just let me know what you think. And let me know what you think of, you know, what I had to say, really, in the last half an hour. And whether you agree or disagree. Right, let's go through your comments. And then, obviously, after we get through all of this, I will get on to the, what do you call it? The proper, you know, weekend preview. But just to clarify again, I am still going to be doing watch-alongs in 2023. Don't think, you know, that I'm going to be quitting or anything like that. I'm not going to be quitting. One thing I am hoping, though, is that soon, and when I mean soon, I mean probably in the next 6 weeks maximum, I'm going to buy a new PC. A lot more of a powerful PC than I've got right now, which has only got 8 gig of RAM. And the one I'm looking at, I think, has 24 or 32 gig of RAM. I can't remember exactly. The reason I want to get a new PC so I can stream in better quality, but also upload professionally edited videos. And one thing I do want to start doing once I get a new PC is doing, you know, detailed analysis, long form type content, looking at stuff from the past in Formula 1 that I think you guys would be interested in. But again, the watch-alongs, all that, they're still going to continue. It's just, given how I'm feeling about Formula 1 at the minute, I'm probably just going to have to cut back in certain areas so I don't burn myself out and, you know, destroy myself and make myself hate Formula 1 a lot quicker than, you know, maybe I will in the future. Maybe I'm just growing out of Formula 1. Maybe Formula 1 is very soon gonna no longer be for me. That's a possibility in the future. But yeah, let me know in the chat what you think. And I hope you're all doing well. And yeah, no matter what time it is in your part of the world, hope you're all having as best a time as possible. Steve says, yeah, I agree. It's been a joke since they robbed Lewis of this title. The amount of unforced crashes leading to safety cars is ridiculous. And Kate is saying the new car regulations have failed, in my opinion. I have seen lots of people saying that, yeah, the new regulations, you know, they haven't worked. And the thing is, obviously, better racing, closer grids in terms of the, you know, the gap from front to back was promised and all of that stuff. And obviously you can't expect them to deliver on all of their promises. That's impossible. But yeah, these new regulations, they're shit. The cars can follow better, but the field isn't exciting, really. I mean, in 2021, the cars could not follow as well. I mean, I think scientifically that is provable that the cars could not follow as well in 2021 as they could now. In 2021, it was, you know, very exciting. We had an amazing Verstappen-Hamilton title fight, and then we had plenty of drivers outside of those two, and even outside of the top teams, able to win races, even get on the podium. We had, Verstappen, Hamilton, Bottas, Perez, Leclerc, Sainz, Norris, Ricciardo, Ocon, Alonso, Vettel, Gasly, and I think Russell as well in the Williams. All of them on the podium in just 2021. At the minute, the only drivers who can realistically get a podium is, what, Verstappen, Perez, Alonso, Stroll, Hamilton, Russell, Leclerc or Sainz. And that's just for the entire season, realistically, who could get a podium. And so far this season, the only drivers to get a podium are Verstappen, Perez, Hamilton, and Leclerc. So, you know, it's not very competitive at the minute, is it? Again, I don't have a problem with Red Bull dominating. Red Bull were dominating, like I said, 10 years ago, and I was still really excited and really into Formula 1, and I loved Formula 1. So, who dominates is not an issue for me, but I think we need to probably stop pretending like the regulations brought in 2022 have worked, because they haven't. The cars can follow closer, but it hasn't made things more exciting. I would go back to 2021 in a heartbeat. Will F1 Gaming says, I never understood why people like that season so much. The first 7 to 8 races of 2019 and 2020 were so dull apart from 2 races each season. Again, I disagree with you, as you know. We have our disagreements on, I think, those seasons in terms of the excitement. But, yeah, you know, there were issues in 2019 and 2020, which made racing in certain races not exciting, which is still prevalent today. Again, the size of the cars, how much they weigh, hasn't been addressed at all. Hasn't been addressed since the V6 hybrid era began. It's only got worse, and will probably only get worse because they just don't care about that aspect. Of course, with the power units we have, the cars are going to weigh more, really, than, you know, the V8 cars, but they don't need to weigh and be as big as they are. They really don't. Because, of course, it's harder to overtake and go racing with someone in these cars that are just so much bigger and wider than what we had even back in, like, 2015, where the cars were so much smaller compared to now and weighed quite a bit less. A Bridges says, I'm having a bit of the same feeling. I'm less in this year. McLaren F1 race says, in Miami, fans are paying $400 to go to the Dan Marino Grand Prix. That's a good one. That's a really good one. I wish I could give you like a star or something in chat, because that's actually a really good fucking pun. To watch a big screen and not even get access to the track action. May as well stay at home and watch in comfort. Yeah. $400 just to go and watch the race on a screen when you could just sit at home and watch it in the comfort of your own home. I don't know why people would do that, to be honest, but there you go. Let's read some more comments from you guys. Nota says, agreed, Chazza. I've watched every race since 2007, and these days I'm watching more of WEC. IMSA. Can't remember exactly what that series is again. Apologies if I don't know. And also says IndyCar. I will be honest, I'm getting more into IndyCar progressively. It is hard still to get into IndyCar because a lot of the races are on later in the day than the F1 race, and a lot of the time I'm just too tired to watch, or even sometimes it's on too late. But when I go and look at the highlights, it taps into why I got into Formula 1 in the first place. Obviously, Formula 1 still had issues to a degree back when I got into it. You know, DRS, stuff like that. And maybe you could say with the way the tyres were. But IndyCar is a lot more what F1 should be. Not completely what it should be. You know, I don't like everything about IndyCar, but IndyCar taps a lot more into what really a motorsport series should be about. Michael Gideon says, in the spring, Florida, you get half-hour shower around 3 p.m, so maybe there will be a chance. Yeah. Maybe. I hope there is, because I don't see a good race this weekend. Robert Heyman says too much emphasis on aero. Yeah, I think that's another big issue. I think I think these cars need to become a lot more. And that's one thing that IndyCar has that's great, is those cars have a lot more mechanical grip. When with these F1 cars, they're too easy to drive. The drivers, I mean, they are amazing drivers. We know that. Obviously, a lot of the drivers on the grid now have driven cars that are harder to drive in the past. But they are too easy to drive, and they're too, again, like you were saying, I think, who was it? Robert in the chat, too much emphasis on aero. Absolutely true. That's one thing, actually, I liked about, even though we had Mercedes domination, and the cars didn't sound as good, that's one thing I liked about 2014, is a lot of the grip, the aero grip, was took away from 2013, and the drivers had to really show their quality with those cars in terms of applying the throttle, just really handling the car through the corners with the, much increased torque the cars had. Yeah, but since then it's just become just too easy to drive these cars when it shouldn't be easy to drive these cars. Steve says, it seems even the drivers have lost interest. It's the two best drivers in the world are talking about early retirement. And Steve also saying, even the young pundits Sky have hired are designed to appeal to Instagram. Opulent says, I leave for Miami in 3 hours going to the race. Hope you have fun. Yeah, just don't destroy your bank account at the track. Scott Dorrow saying, this is business. Number one priority is money. I know what the priority is, but in the long term, it's not gonna. I don't think it's gonna work for them. I think it's just gonna drive the. I think it's just gonna drive the hardcore fans away from F1, and then eventually at some point the more casual fans are just not going to be as interested in F1 because the quality will probably dip in the future with the way things are going, and Formula One will just not be, a very good thing to consume as a viewer. Steve says, if it was under the old rules, that wouldn't be so bad, but the new setup is a joke. Josiah says, we need to rename F1 from a motorsport to a motor business. That's all about the money and nothing else. D'Angelo Williams says, F1 as an organic sport is gone. Chaz are the reason why I dislike the numerous amount of racing / sprints is a lack of mystery plus build up for every race. Yeah, I totally agree. That's one thing that even before I started doing this, content, watch-alongs and all of that, that's one thing that, especially when I got into Formula One initially, that I used to, that I still kind of miss out on, is how nervous I would be before the start of the race, because you just didn't know what possible crazy things could happen. And again, with the sprints, you just continuously losing that excitement in the build up to a race. And eventually, I reckon by 2026, maybe not that soon, but this is just a prediction from me. I reckon by 2026, there'll be a sprint race every weekend. Every single weekend. And that will just kill F1. McLaren from races. I watch the odd football match and have little interest or knowledge in the sport, so I suppose we need to embrace the casual F1 viewer. The thing is, there's a difference between a new viewer and a casual viewer, because the casual viewer doesn't, or isn't as engaged maybe in Formula One as we are. and isn't as hooked as we are. So, they don't care as much for this sport as we do. And if in the future, because of increased sprint races and just silly shit that Liberty Media bring into Formula One makes Formula One more boring, those casual viewers they'll just go somewhere else. And, they won't make a fuss about it. They'll just be gone. So we shouldn't appeal to the casuals, at least in a big way, in my view. It should be, just making Formula One or presenting, in my view, obviously I know what they're trying to do is make as much money for themselves as they can. Obviously I know that's what Liberty Media are trying to do. I'm not an idiot that I see out there with certain people that genuinely think that Liberty Media are trying to or genuinely think at times that they're making Formula One better. I think at times they don't think that. I think they more so think that, or they think really just about how they can increase the value and get more eyes on Formula One, more ratings, which is increase again the value of Formula One. But really, I think the concentration should be presenting Formula One in its absolute best form. And, coming out with a set of rules and sticking to a format that showcases the absolute best of Formula One. And the current format and these current cars is not it. I'm not saying let's go back to V10s. I don't want to go back to V10s. We've moved on. But there's a lot that could be done that, there's a lot of things that could be fiddled with to make things better that has nothing to do with the format of a weekend. Crystal Racing says Bernie Eccleston made that suggestion back in 2003. Yeah, he did. He's had some mental ideas, I'd say, from the past. Robert Heyman says, I feel the races are won or lost at the engineering level before the season even begins, therefore eliminating or at least mitigating. What the hell am I talking about? Mitigating driver talent. I mean, that has been an issue to a degree for a very long time. Even going back to the 90s or even the 1980s to a degree. So that's not a new thing, but I mean, there's a person at uni who I've talked to in the past, who obviously I'm still, doing the course, coming to the end of my first year, and just getting on to the final assignments for the first year. Hopefully I can do well. Wish me luck. But yeah, I remember saying it to them that one issue I've got with Formula One is that the drivers just don't have enough input into the performance of the car or the performance of, or just their result. And I think that's, again, another issue with Formula One. I think these cars are so, compared to a lot of other F1 cars from the past, I think these cars are so easy to drive now that the driver doesn't make as much of a contribution as they did 10 years ago. I think the driver really makes at most probably a 20 to 25% contribution to the actual result that a team gets. And that, again, is an issue because the drivers are just, more and more becoming irrelevant. D'Angelo Williams says F1 is going in the direction of Hunger Games / Squid Game. All these changes are killing the sport. Hello to Vinster. Good to see you, mate. Crystal Racing says it's time to accept F1 as a boring sport. When it becomes exciting, it's luck and / all midfield teams making good investments and developments. Josiah, did Karoom block you for that? No. I mean, maybe I shouldn't have said it, but that was just my initial reaction, was just shut the fuck up. Because, people like him who are in the media have the ability to have some sort of sway. And we cannot have people like him representing us in any way when he, comes up with ideas, or even just, he didn't come up with the idea, obviously he was talking about how it was Crofty's idea, but just putting that idea out there, again, just no. Laurie Rastogi says, regarding the excitement of the season, I struggle to see how even Netflix can make it exciting. Yeah. I'm sure they'll be having trouble at the minute making it exciting, but I'm sure they'll be inventing many things to try and make things seem more exciting than they actually are, which they are great at doing, such as creating fake rivalries that never existed and will never exist, like the Carlos Sainz Daniel Ricciardo one. But I mean, obviously the Drive to Survive stuff, it's been good for Formula One. It's brought in a lot of new viewers. The issue is, though, Liberty Media is now appealing to that style of content and is now wanting Formula One essentially to design itself in a way that appeals to Drive to Survive fans. And again, I have no problem with people that came from Drive to Survive and that's their route into Formula One. No problem with them at all. And I hope they, are having a great time enjoying Formula One. But I feel like, again, Liberty is appealing to that side just too much and just making Formula One more, say, WWE-like. I think I said this before as well in the past. A big reason why, and I still won't ever watch Formula E, is because I used to think that Formula E was more like WWE, and I compared Formula One a few years ago more to, say, closer to like Olympic style wrestling in terms of comparing it to, the differences in real wrestling and fake wrestling. I was trying to make that comparison, but that was 5-6 years ago when I think first made that comparison. Now, I would say Formula One is probably closer to WWE than it is, real wrestling, if you wanted to do that type of comparison. It wouldn't surprise me in 10 years' time if Liberty Media, deliberately start fixing the sport in a way where we have script writers that essentially write out an entire race that will then play out on track. I honestly would not be surprised if that happened in the future, because that is the way things are heading. The very dangerous and slippery slope that we're headed on. Let's find some other comments here if I can. I don't want to spend too long on this, of course, because it is quite depressing. Michael Gideon says, yes, indie in the 90s was the perfect mix, then Tony George killed it. I've seen some indie stuff from the 90s, and yeah, it looks pretty good from then as well, but the IndyCar stuff just looks, to me, more appealing. In terms of like why I find motorsport interesting, rather than what the direction Formula One is headed in. Steve says, but money is only a priority for Liberty Media, not for the teams. That shouldn't be the case for a governing body. The FIA, though, they don't care. As long as more eyes get onto Formula One, I don't think they really care. They don't run Formula One. Liberty Media do. And in the winter, that became even more of a reality. That truth, really, that the FIA do not run Formula One at all. Liberty Media run Formula One. Crystal Racing says, I only run motorsports in the 2000s for the sake of reminding kids of how good Kimi was. That win at Spa 2004, losing his engine at Nürburgring 2003, 5, 6, and 7. Right. Yeah, let's find a few more comments and then I reckon we'll get into this proper preview because I've been going on this for quite a while. But I think you guys get my point. My interest, like I said, it's waning in Formula 1. Let me know what your thoughts are when it comes to that. But my interest is starting to wane and starting to go downward. I hope it does improve. Maybe next season or whatever, we'll get like a 2021 style season and I'll be proven wrong that Formula 1, has the ability to still be amazing on a consistent basis and really have us hooked. But at the minute, I am not hooked. Really, I'm just desperate for us to just get through this weekend's race because I think we're in for an awful race in Miami. McLaren F1 Race is the only country that's getting really screwed by Sky and F1 is the UK. $34.99 a month to watch our beloved sport. I've got in for £21 a month on special offer, but hey, why not milk the Brits as usual? True. And as well with me, I mean, I pay for the entire. I'm not going to say how much I pay for Sky. It is quite a bit of money per month, but I pay for the entire Sky Sports package. So, because I also like to watch football and that. So, obviously, watching Formula 1, which I need to do this on the channel, is quite expensive. Nota says, something I've heard from many different people, they say they watch Drive to Survive but don't watch the races. Well, if that is true, then maybe we shouldn't be appealing necessarily. Those certain people. Steve says Sky's F1 YouTube content consists of videos like we asked the drivers what their favourite colour is, or we got the drivers to play Truth or Dare. I know, I'm not into that stuff, to be honest, but they try to get the drivers to do fun stuff, which, I mean, sometimes it's entertaining, but sometimes it's just boring. Not pedantic, just boring shit, really. Colin P says 100% agree. Sprint races ruined whole weekend. Currently, last weekend was awful. However, I think eventually they'll find a format with a sprint that works. The sprint should test different skills. I mean, I disagree. I don't. I don't think there is a format where the sprint really adds and makes a weekend more exciting. I just don't think it. I don't think there's a format that does exist for that. But the thing is as well, they're not even doing sprint races correctly. I mean, if you're going to properly commit to doing sprint races, do what Formula 2 does, reverse the top 10. And actually, make things... If you want to go in that direction, just commit even harder to it. Why, what's the point of sprint qualifying on a Saturday morning? Which, from what I heard, wasn't really that good in Baku. In Baku. I didn't watch a second of it. I did watch the sprint race, which I thought was just mediocre at best. But yeah, it's like, if you're going to do the sprint, why not just commit absolutely to it and, do what we've seen with the sprint in Formula 2 or Formula 3, where you get reverse grids. Why not commit to it properly? I don't get it. Scott Doro says it would be £1,200 or $1,200, per year in the USA for NASCAR and Formula E. I'm assuming you mean in terms of how much it costs for fans to attend, when with F1 you need, at minimum $5,000 if you're going to attend all 3 American races. And that's me being, I'm starting at base level when I say $5,000. McLaren F1 race says the best weekend of my life was going to the 2015 British Grand Prix, £300 all weekend, including camping, and walked the pit straight after Lewis won. Was an awesome weekend, yeah. That was back when F1 was a lot more for us, the diehard F1 fans. I mean, the only F1 weekend I've been to was 2014 Spanish Grand Prix. Of course, you guys know I went to testing in 2019 at the same track in Catalonia. But yeah, 2014 Spanish Grand Prix. The ticket prices were, very good compared to what they're like now. Obviously, I know these days with the economy in different nations, we've got inflation, interest rate rises, all of that stuff. I know we've got all of that going on, and the economy is in a lot worse position than it was back then. But yeah, those were really much better days to attend Formula One than it is now, where you need to basically sell your house to even hope of getting a ticket. Scott Doris says, no, Chaz, that is the pay cost for TV. Right. Well, cheers for letting me know. Crystal Racing saying Formula E is garbage. Yeah, I agree. But, yeah, those are my thoughts as to the state of Formula One, I guess. I guess that's what you could call what I just talked about for the last hour. The state of Formula One, in my view, and just my current thoughts and my current interest level, I guess, in Formula One. But I will say this. In the future, if I do decide, if it gets to a point where I'm like, I can't do it anymore, I can't watch Formula One anymore, do not think that I'm going to stop doing content. I will still do content, but what the content will be is me looking back on, things in Formula One history that, from a better time in Formula One that are, interesting topics that I think I could probably do good, or maybe good or decent videos on. So if that day does come in the future where I'm like, yeah, I can't watch Formula One anymore, it's just not for me anymore, don't think that I'm just going to give up on the channel. I will still be doing stuff. Don't worry about that. And definitely for this year, I'm going to still, push on. And what do you call it? I'm still going to push on and do watch-alongs and that. But I'm not going to smile through the pain, I guess. I guess that's maybe a way you could, a way of putting it. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to pretend that we're going to have like a great race at a certain track, or I'm not going to get my expectations up too much. I want to read this comment out though from Kama Jiu-Jitsu, who says, your very first boring crybaby podcast, no biggie, I'll still listen to you on quali and race days. If you don't like me sharing my opinion, then just fuck off. Simple as that. I'm allowed to share my thoughts. Everyone is allowed to. So if you don't like it, go somewhere else. As far as I'm concerned. Michael Gideon says Liberty charges the local tracks too much to host, so they have to charge over the top ticket prices. That started with Bernie. Yeah, that trend did start with Bernie and it's just got worse. But yeah, that comment is just so fucking stupid. I'm allowed to share my thoughts as to, how I think Formula One is at the minute. And, I'm being honest with my viewers that, my interest in Formula One at the minute isn't at its best. I'm not going to just sit here and be fake as fuck and pretend that I'm not going to come on here and be like, oh, well, here we go, guys, for another exciting weekend of F1, when it's not going to be an exciting weekend of F1 because we're racing around to just a soulless racetrack and these cars are just not very exciting and the season just isn't very exciting. So, yeah, I'll say whatever the fuck I want. Anyway, obviously, this channel and me, not for everyone. Anyway, let's now get into the weekend preview for the Miami Grand Prix. I'm not going to do a ton of stuff in terms of previewing this race. It's going to be a lot of the stuff that I normally go through for the, building up to a race. We'll get into data. We'll get into upgrades. There has been a couple upgrades to get through for a couple of the teams. One upgrade for the Ferrari team that I know you guys will be interested in seeing. And also, yeah, I'll get into my predictions for how I think the weekend will go. Let's start, though, with the championship standings. And on the driver's side, Max Verstappen is in the lead by just 6 points from Sergio Perez. I know people are trying to hype up a championship fight between Verstappen and Perez, but really, I don't think we're going to have a title fight between Verstappen and Perez. Verstappen is still going to win the championship by a country mile. I don't think Perez realistically has a chance. Alonso in third, 12 points clear of Hamilton in fourth. With Sainz in fifth, Leclerc is up to sixth place. Good to see. And only 6 points behind his teammate. George Russell level on points with Leclerc in seventh. The only reason Leclerc's ahead of him is because Leclerc had a better, or so far this season, has a better best race result than Russell does. Leclerc's best race result is third. George Russell's is fourth from Saudi Arabia, I believe. Lance Stroll just a point behind in eighth, with Lando Norris in ninth and Nico Hülkenberg still in the top 10 of the championship. On the constructor side, Red Bull almost 100 points clear of Aston Martin in second. That's just how dominant they are in 2023. Aston Martin second, only 11 points clear of Mercedes in third, and Ferrari have closed the gap quite a bit. They're only now a race win in terms of points away from second place Aston Martin. So Ferrari now roaring back into life in 2023. Good to see. McLaren in fifth. They pulled away from Alpine by a couple points. They're now 6 points clear of the Alpine team, who are 1 clear of 1 point clear of the Haas team, who are also 1 point clear of Alfa Romeo. AlphaTauri have a point extra after, of course, Tsunoda scored a point in Baku, and they are in ninth with Williams in P10. Now, let's get on to the Miami Grand Prix and the Miami track, and let's get on to how I think things will go this weekend. So this is the track that I really don't like. The first sector is from turn 1 that you can see at the end of the third DRS activation. Obviously, the corners you can see numbered here on the screen. From turn 1 until I think turn 9 is exactly the first sector. First sector has a decent flow, like I said. It's not a great first sector. I really don't like the first 2 corners. After that, though, it's fine. And I don't really like turns 7 and 8 that much, to be honest. But decent flow in the first sector. But really, the first sector is about your high-speed corner performance and how well your rear end and aero really is working in that part of the track. Now, of course, what I do in my weekend previews is I go and look at sectors from tracks we've just been to and compare them to, this sector, and look at from that sector at that race who was quick and who was not. So for the first sector in Miami, I've decided to compare it to the final sector in Melbourne, which is similar. It's not totally similar, but it is the most similar type of sector we've been to most recently. So Red Bull, as expected, the quickest in that sector. Not by a massive amount from the Ferrari team, but definitely quicker. Haas F1 were quite impressive, and I have to say this season that has been a good aspect of the Haas car, is at high speed, whether it's in a straight line or in high-speed corners, the Haas car does seem to be pretty quick. Nico Hülkenberg, though, in the high-speed turn 3, ended up crashing out of the session, so wasn't great for the Hulk. But the Haas car in high-speed corners and just at high speed in general is a good car. Mercedes were okay, and really Mercedes and Aston Martin on similar pace in that type of sector, and then a bit of a drop off to the midfield, the proper midfield, in terms of this sector. Alpine, a couple tenths away from Aston Martin. McLaren about a tenth off of the Alpine team. Of course, though, since that Australian Grand Prix, McLaren have brought an upgrade which has improved their car. So I'm expecting them in this type of sector to be a couple tenths of a second quicker than what we saw before the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Of course, at Baku, there are no high-speed corners. It's, well, there is a couple, but they aren't really proper corners. A lot of the corners there are, medium or slow-speed corners. So, yeah, I'm expecting McLaren to definitely perform better in high-speed corners than what we saw in Melbourne. Williams did pretty decent as well in the high-speed corners, as we know with Williams at high speed also. They tend to be pretty quick, but AlphaTauri and Alfa Romeo, they tended to be pretty slow back in Melbourne. So, looking back at the track, for the first sector, I reckon Red Bull definitely the quickest team. For Ferrari second, Mercedes and Aston Martin, I'd imagine, would be matched for third and fourth. And then after that, McLaren, probably best of the rest, ahead of Alpine. Actually, maybe not. Let me revise that. Maybe McLaren and Haas on equal footing with, say, Alpine just behind. And then maybe just behind them, the Williams team. I think that's more likely how it will look in that first sector. But then, of course, from turn 10 all the way until the exit of turn 16, you have the middle sector of the Miami International Autodrome. The middle sector, in my view, is a really bad sector. The corners are terrible and really pedestrian. You do have, though, a quite long DRS activation point, which of course may come into effect in terms of having an effect in Sunday's race. They have, though, shortened the DRS zones for the back straight between turn 16 and 17, and also between turn 9 and turn 11 as well. So overtaking this weekend made even harder despite the track we're racing at. So, yeah, brilliant job there by the FIA. But, yeah, for the middle sector, really, it's all about top speed, but also slow speed corner performance. There are no high-speed corners in the middle sector. So, for the middle sector in Miami, I decided to compare it to the first sector in Baku, which is similar to that sector, just a bit longer, I think, the first sector in Baku, where in Baku you've got a couple long straights, and then the corners really are just either medium or slow speed corners. You don't have any high speed corners in the first sector in Baku. And in Baku, Red Bull, again, half a tenth quicker than Ferrari. McLaren were very good in the slow speed corners in the first sector, despite a bad top speed. And we saw this last season, and it is still the case. The slower the corners, the better that McLaren car is. And that's why they were so quick in the first sector in Baku in qualifying. Aston Martin really did suffer. I think more likely because of certain DRS issues at times. But yeah, they did suffer quite a bit in that first sector, despite the slow speed corners, you'd think, suiting their car. Mercedes also suffered quite heavily, being half a second slower alone in that sector. And we know with the Mercedes car, because it is the same car concept as what we saw last year, they do struggle with slow corners. They always have, really, since the start of this, these regulations back at the start of 2022. Their car only likes high-speed corners. So that's why they were so slow in the first sector in Baku. And that's why in the middle sector in Miami, they're going to be pretty slow there, in my view. Alpine looked okay. AlphaTauri looked pretty good. Alfa Romeo looked a bit better. And then Williams and, Haas were really struggling in Baku. I think they'll be a bit better than what we saw here in Baku. I think they'll be a bit better this weekend in Miami. But for the middle sector, I'll go back to the track map. Yeah, for the middle sector, I think most likely Red Bull again will be the quickest team. Ferrari will be second. And then probably, I'd imagine Aston Martin will be the third best team from Mercedes and McLaren like equalish on fourth and fifth quickest, and then after that probably Alpine, and then maybe AlphaTauri or Haas F1, something like that. So yeah, the middle sector should come a bit more to Aston Martin than the first sector will, and yeah, definitely McLaren will be a bit quicker in the middle sector than they will, I think, in the first sector here in Miami, because of those slow corners of turn 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, which will help their car's performance. Then the final sector, I've decided not to compare it to any sector we've been to, because it's a very simple part of the track, and it's a very simple sector where it's one long dead straight to the final real corner of turn 17. And then you exit that corner, go through turn 18 and 19, which is flat out. It's not a real corner. I mean, it'd only be a real corner in the wet, really. Onto the start-finish line to start a new lap. And yeah, there is not a sector we've been to so far this year that is similar to that, where it's just two on-throttle sections with a hairpin, basically, smack bang in the middle. So, in terms of the pecking order for this weekend's race, my expectation is that it will be Red Bull, and when I'm talking about pecking order, I'm talking about qualifying. It will be Red Bull quickest, Ferrari second, probably Mercedes just about third, ahead of Aston Martin. I'll get onto why in a moment. And then McLaren fifth, Alpine sixth, and then Haas very close to Alpine, but probably just about slower. Say seventh, and then probably AlphaTauri and Williams eighth and ninth, and then Alfa Romeo I think definitely will be the slowest team here in Miami in qualifying, and quite possibly for the race as well. Alfa Romeo don't seem to be very quick right now. But let's get on to my predictions for the Miami Grand Prix. So here's my top 10 qualifying prediction with my predicted gaps. Max Verstappen, I think, will get pole position. Charles Leclerc, I'm going to go second, because I don't think Ferrari over a single lap are going to be too far behind. And I think Leclerc, as we saw last year, he is very good around this track and is obviously very good at street circuits as well. Perez, I think, will be back in third. The reason I don't think he's going to be that quick this weekend is because last year in Miami, he wasn't that quick, really, compared to his teammates. So, yeah, I think Perez will be back in third. Carlos Sainz will be fourth, with Hamilton just about in fifth, ahead of Alonso sixth, with Russell seventh, Stroll in eighth. And yeah, Mercedes and Aston Martin, I think, is probably going to be the most interesting battle this weekend in terms of the entire field. And then it'll be Lando Norris in ninth and Pierre Gasly in 10th. Watch out for Gasly this weekend, though, because he was very quick here last year in the AlphaTauri. Was running, I think, in 7th place in the race until Alonso hit the back of him and caused a puncture. So, yeah, watch out for Gasly. He's been very competitive here in the past. And then my race prediction, to be honest, is not very different from my qualifying prediction. And in terms of the predicted gaps I've gone for, it is very pessimistic, to be honest. Max Verstappen, I think, will win from Perez second with about a 10-second gap. Leclerc will be third. And yes, I think he will be, if there is no safety car, which, just to remind you, these predicted gaps are based off of, if there is no safety car or red flag, what I think the gaps will be. Yes, I do think Leclerc in third will be 42 seconds behind Max at the end of the race. I expect Red Bull to be in a league of their own in the race, which is really where Red Bull do dominate. Carlos Sainz will be in fourth, holding back a train of cars of Hamilton, Alonso, and Stroll, who I think will get ahead of Russell at the start and stay ahead. Russell, for the second race in a row, will finish in eighth, and then it will be Lando Norris in P9, a lap down, with Pierre Gasly in P10, also a lap down. So yeah, not much overtaking, I think, for the race on Sunday. But let me just quickly get into, or in a moment actually, get into what I think will happen for or not. I mean, I've kind of got into what I think will happen this weekend, but I will get a bit more in depth with the teams and drivers as to why I think they'll end up with the results that I've gone for. Before I do that, though, let me just quickly say, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Of course, I will be doing a qualifying and race watch along for this weekend's race. Here is the schedule. I'll be live tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. UK time. Firstly, for the qualifying preview until 9 p.m. 9 p.m. is when qualifying begins. Obviously, it'll be finishing around 10 p.m. and then I'll be doing a reaction with you guys to the session for probably about half an hour after as well. And then on Sunday, I'll be live at 6:30 p.m. UK time for the race watch along. We'll start with the preview, and the preview will last until, say, 8 p.m. Obviously, the race starts at 8:30 p.m. and then I'll be live, obviously, throughout the race and to do a bit of reaction after the race as well until 11 p.m. or even later than that, of course, if the race does go any longer than I'm expecting. So don't worry, plenty of content coming your way. 3 hours tomorrow and then 4.5 hours at least on Sunday. And, of course, if there is actually anything to talk about of interest from the race, I will do a video or something on Monday afternoon, evening, something like that. But I'll leave these race predictions up for a moment, and I just want to do a poll quickly. And I'm not going to ask you guys who you think's going to win, because I think we all know who's going to win. Let me ask you guys who you think will finish in third this weekend. So who do you think will finish third at the Miami GP? And the options will be Leclerc. I'll go Leclerc, Hamilton, Alonso, Russell, because those are the four best drivers, really, outside of the two Red Bulls. Obviously, the Red Bulls drivers are not, they don't have the best driver lineup on the grid, but I don't think Carlos Sainz and Lance Stroll are looking awfully likely to be on the podium, given their current performances. But, yeah, let me know in the chat, who do you think will be on the podium and finishing in third place? Assuming, of course, you guys think it'll be a Ferrari, not Ferrari 1-2, I wish, a Red Bull 1-2. Let me know in the chat. My prediction is it will be Charles Leclerc. Let me know whether you think Mercedes or even Aston Martin can get on the podium. Of course, Mercedes have only had one podium this season. Ferrari only one podium so far. Aston Martin have had 3, and that's a big reason why they're second in the championship. But yeah, let me know in that poll whether you agree with my prediction or disagree. But I will come to you guys in the chat a bit later on, so make sure to keep posting your comments. I will come back to them at some point. But, yeah, I think let's get into at least the front-running teams and get into how I think they'll do this weekend and talk about it in a bit more depth. We'll quickly go through Red Bull. They've got the best car. The only hope in stopping them this weekend is if Ferrari, like they did in Baku, produce an amazing lap and somehow get pole position with Charles Leclerc. And given how hard I think it will be to overtake on Sunday, if Leclerc was to get pole, there's a real possibility that Red Bull could be beaten, despite Ferrari clearly then being slower than Red Bull in the race, because again, the difficulty of overtaking. So, yeah, as long as Red Bull get pole position, they'll win the race by an absolute country mile, and that's my prediction. I think they'll be on pole. They won't be on the front row, but I think they'll be on pole, and they will get a 1-2 very easily in the race itself. They cannot be stopped right now. The soonest race I can see them being stopped is probably when we get to, say, Austria or Silverstone, which is the start of July. I reckon that's probably the soonest we could actually see Red Bull be stopped, because by then Red Bull will have to stop developing their car because they won't be able really to do much else given the limitations put on them for 2023. So, yeah, they're going to win quite a few more races. That is for sure in 2023. And yeah, again, I don't think Perez is going to be on the pace of Verstappen this weekend. Max was incredibly quick here last year in a car that was on similar pace really to the Ferrari. So imagine what they can do this weekend with them being quite a bit better than they were this time last year. Yeah, I think Verstappen definitely ahead of Perez. Perez, if he is quite a bit slower by 2 or 3 tenths that I expect he'll be, slower than Verstappen this weekend, then he's just got to make sure that he gets, second and keeps it at least close going forward until we come to another track that he could maybe get ahead of Verstappen, such as Monaco, where of course Perez outperformed him last year. But yeah, Red Bull are going to dominate this weekend. There is no doubt about that. Next up, the Ferrari team. We will get on to in a moment once we go through the front-running teams. We will get on to upgrades. And of course, Ferrari have got a new upgrade this weekend. They have a new, I think, floor design. And it is the start of a planned series of upgrades. They do have a bigger upgrade coming for the Spanish Grand Prix in Barcelona, which is in about a month from now, I think. So yeah, upgrades now starting to come. Hopefully they really do work for Ferrari. Of course, they do have a history of not really making their car better through the course of a season. I hope that's different this year, but until I'm proven wrong, I'm not going to assume that they're just going to automatically get better. But yeah, Ferrari, I think, will be the second best team. The reason I think that is because I do think they found a better way with their car from from Baku, and I think they learnt valuable lessons from that race that will serve them well, at least for the next few races. And I think also looking at the track layout, I don't think the track layout really suits Mercedes and Aston Martin enough for them to be, right there with Ferrari even in qualifying. In the race, yeah, Ferrari are going to be fighting with Aston Martin and Mercedes to a certain extent. But really, as long as Ferrari finish 3rd and 4th at worst in qualifying and make sure that the cars ahead of them are not Aston Martin or Mercedes, and make sure that it is only Red Bull at best that are ahead of them, then again, given the difficulty that will be had to overtake at this track, and remember, of course, they do have very good power, Ferrari, very good straight line speed, so it will be hard to overtake them. If they've got the grid position, the track position, I really don't see how they're overtaken. I just don't see it at all. So really qualifying is the key for Ferrari. And if they get the result, I predict they'll get 2nd and 4th, I can't see how they're just going to drop off a cliff in terms of their result from what we saw or what we might see in qualifying. So, yeah, I think Ferrari will be fine, and I think they will make further gains on Aston Martin and Mercedes in the Constructors' Championship. Like I said, I'll get onto the Ferrari upgrade soon. Mercedes, they have not brought any upgrades here. Of course, they've got the first batch of big upgrades coming at the next race in 2 weeks from now at Imola, which, of course, we all hope is going to really work for them. And I really do hope it does, to at least spice things up. But, yeah, Mercedes look maybe not as bad as what they looked in Baku, but they don't look really that great. The only benefit, the only plus compared to Baku is they seem to be a bit better off around this track than Aston Martin. And I think the reason that is because, at least in the first sector, we have high-speed corners that the Mercedes car does enjoy quite a bit. But of course, in Baku, we don't have really any high-speed corners, and that's a big reason why Mercedes were so slow in Baku just a week ago, and that's why they were the 4th quickest team in Baku as well. So yeah, this weekend looks better for them, but really they're just waiting until they get to this upgrade coming in a couple of weeks. I think even Lewis Hamilton has said he is literally counting down the days until he gets to this upgrade, because they obviously, with this zero pod concept, it just hasn't gone anywhere, and they need to now continue on a different path, and obviously that begins at Imola. And I really hope we see, somewhat an explosion of pace from them, because it would definitely, I think, make things a bit more interesting. But Mercedes this weekend, their fight is with Aston Martin. I've got to say though, despite them not having a great start to the season, only one podium in the first 4 races, I think they've really done the best they could with what they have. They're only 11 points behind Aston Martin in the championship for second. They're in a better position in the championship compared to whoever was second last year, which I think was Red Bull at this point. Compared to last year. And I think they've scored more points at this point of 2023 than they did at this point of 2022. So they have improved on 2022 on the first 5 races or 4 races of that year, but obviously they want to be winning races and winning championships, and that's what they want to be getting back to very, very soon. But this weekend their fight will be with Aston Martin, and if they do get the result that I predict they'll get in the race, which will be 14 points at least, that would be a good return, I think, from this weekend. And then at Imola, the season for them hopefully properly gets going. And finally, we will get on to the Aston Martin team, who really, since Melbourne, have just not really looked as good as as what we saw before. By the way, I'm just saying, this is from like an hour ago, that Leclerc in the Ferrari has taken on a new gearbox. So that is what's happening there for the Monegasque. Hopefully no reliability issues for him. But for Aston Martin, they just haven't looked as quick since the Australian Grand Prix. Really, it's been since we obviously had this 4-week-long break in between Melbourne and Baku. They just don't look as competitive as what we saw at the start of the season. Maybe it's because they're just trying to really focus on the upgrades coming for I think Imola. I think they've targeted to bring really a lot of their big new upgrades to move them on a bit. But they just don't seem to be as quick as what we saw at the start of the season, is the point I'm trying to make. But there is still a possibility for a decent result this weekend. I mean, Alonso, I think, did the absolute maximum that he could in Baku, finishing 4th and only a second behind Leclerc for the podium. I think the best he could do this weekend is probably 4th. It would require, though, him finishing ahead of both Mercedes drivers and, of course, his teammate in qualifying, and ending up, say, 5th, maybe 4th if he can get ahead of Sainz. But I think realistically, I don't think he'll be ahead of Sainz on the grid, because I think Ferrari will be too quick. But if Alonso is to get a 4th place or even better, then I think he has to be at worst 5th on the grid. I can't see him 6th or 7th and finishing in 4th place. I just don't see that happening, because again, I don't see many overtaking happening at this track this weekend. So qualifying is the key for Aston Martin if they're going to outscore Mercedes and keep up what's been a good season so far. Lance Stroll, he won't be too far behind Alonso. He was pretty decent here with his speed last year in Miami. And Aston Martin were actually pretty quick here this time last year. Of course, though, this time last year, their car was in a completely different spot and had a completely different concept. And then obviously at Barcelona, that's really where their improvements up until this point, at the early part of 2023, really got going. So Lance Stroll, he'll be in there as well, fighting away with the two Mercedes drivers, and maybe to a degree his teammate as well. But Aston Martin, I think, will end up behind Mercedes, and the reason I think they'll end up behind them is because there's not enough slow speed corners that the Aston Martin car clearly likes over the Mercedes car, but also especially in the final sector, the Mercedes is too, not too quick, but just a tad quicker in a straight line than the Aston Martin car is. And that will help Mercedes just about be quicker than Aston Martin this weekend. And that's why I think Aston Martin will be ever so slightly slower and be the fourth best team this weekend in Miami. But let me know, guys, in the chat what you think of that and what you think of the top four teams and how you think they'll be this weekend. Let me know in the poll in the chat, who do you think will be on the podium in third place behind the two Red Bulls. Very close vote at the moment. Make sure to vote again if you haven't already. I can see we're currently on 33 likes. Let's try and get up to 40 likes if we can before the end of the stream. That would be great if we could. But before I come back to you guys in the chat, let me get onto these upgrades quickly. There's not been a ton of upgrades, I have to say. Only, 2 or 3 teams have brought upgrades here, I think. But, right. Yeah, let me just get onto some of them now. And, hold on. Right. So, and I'll just quickly get it off on screen. So, obviously, this is all from Albert Fabrega, a brilliant person to follow on Twitter if you want to keep up to date with F1 news and also upgrades to the cars and all of that. Here's one to the, it says new mirror aerofoil support on the Alpha Tauri's mirror. And yeah, you can see underneath the Orlan there. On the top, obviously, is the one they've got now in Miami. On the one on the bottom is from Baku. And you can see there a clear difference. So a slight upgrade there, which won't make a massive difference. Some new cooling louvers. I don't know how to pronounce that word, to be honest. But basically new cooling devices on the Aston Martin. And you can see the differences here, I think, from Miami to what maybe they ran in Baku. Temperatures, as he says, will reach 30 degrees Celsius here. It'll be a very hot race in Florida. Here is, though, the new Miami upgrade for Ferrari, the new floor. Only slight differences, really. I mean, on the top here, you can see the new floor. On the bottom is the old one. The only differences, really, is just slight differences in the curvature of the floor on the edge here of the floor. As you can see here with these hand arrows that he's got, pointing out the ever so slight differences. It's not a massive upgrade, but you know, if it improves their car, then obviously it should go on the car. And then a slightly updated diffuser, I think, for Ferrari as well. So the upgrade they brought is not, it's nothing massive, but it is an upgrade nonetheless. And let's hope for Ferrari does give them a slight bit more grip. But again, as was confirmed earlier on Twitter, Ferrari will be bringing a bigger upgrade to Barcelona in about 4 weeks from now. So, yeah, there you go. Those are the upgrades for Miami. The only noticeable ones. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in the chat to the comments that I was reading and start from there, really, and go through to pick out the best ones. With the midfield teams, of course, we'll just whiz through them. By the way, cheers for 40 likes. That was very quick. Let's try and get up to 50 if we can. And yeah, if you haven't hit the like button yet, make sure to do so. That comment, what a fucking idiot. That Kama Jiu-Jitsu saying your very first boring crybaby podcast is so fucking stupid. Michael Gideon says, oh no, I read that one out earlier. Scott says, Chaz, don't give those comments a light of day. They don't warrant comment. I had to comment. It was just, yeah, asking for me to say what I said. Let's read some other stuff out, though. McLaren from Race says, I really hope Miami is exciting, Shazza. You make me laugh as well as you bring a lot of knowledge in the sport. We need your channel, mate. You speak the truth. Thanks for that. Really appreciate it. Crystal Racing says, the worst thing about F1 is how rule changes are implemented to fix previous failed rule changes. Yeah, to a degree it does happen. D'Angelo Williams says Lewis or George for third place. And also says, definitely believe he'll be a Mercedes driver. They haven't brought upgrades all season long, and they have a car seemingly fundamentally fast at high downforce circuits. It depends the type of track we go to. So yeah. Maybe they'll be a bit more competitive than what I said. I mean, obviously they were first and second in practice 1. I don't think it'll be that. I don't think that'll be the case in practice 2 and the rest of the weekend. It's actually funny. I remember last year in Miami, they were really quick in Friday practice, and then on the Saturday they were 1.1 seconds off pole position. So yeah, don't believe Mercedes' good pace, because we've seen it before. Kofi Dixon says Mercedes will be the second fastest team before the end of the season. Yeah, I think there's a possibility that could be the case. Crystal Racing says, I'll admit I've damaged my own life by obsessively watching sport on TV. I've done previous rants on hating F1 and calling it boring, but it's my fault for prolonging my interest. I'm the clown. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to my interest in F1, I don't want to get to the point where I clearly don't like it anymore and I'm just forcing myself to watch it. I would hate myself so much if I was in that position. And that's why I'm saying, in the future, there is a possibility that I might not be watching Formula 1 anymore. Doesn't mean I won't be doing F1 content. I will probably still do F1 content, just about, older F1 stuff from the era of Formula 1 that I like. But, yeah, I don't want to get to that point where I'm just forcing myself to go through the pain, in a way. And, I mean, one thing also that's kind of helped towards my waning interest is I've been, in the past few weeks, I've been to like 2 or 3 football matches, and I do like football quite a bit. I do enjoy it, quite a lot. I don't always watch football. I don't watch every single match. I'm not that hooked on football, but also going to 2 or 3 matches recently, and great atmosphere and enjoyable football and all of that. It's kind of like shifted my interests slightly, because at the minute F1 just isn't quite hitting the mark. Is Leclerc taking a penalty, by the way? No, he will not be taking a penalty. Say Regara says, I just beg Formula 1 not to make DRS go to 1.5 seconds back. Yeah, I really hope that doesn't happen. Georgie Popov says Ferrari will have 1-2, Aston Martin 3-4, Mercedes 5-6, McLaren 7-8, Alfa Romeo 9-10, Red Bulls will both DNF. That's an interesting prediction. Hello to Brabham, who says, hello, young Shazza. Inside 404 says, no idea how YouTube recommended your channel to me, but I'm glad it did. Keep it up. Well, great, obviously, that you can be here. And great, obviously, that the algorithm has recommended my channel. Joe says, I think Mercedes got quicker in the last lap 1 practice. I think Mercedes found a bit of pace. I hope they have, but I think once the teams properly show their what do you call it? I think once the teams properly show their true pace, I think they'll drop back quite a bit. Say Regar says, in fact, the best Formula 1 moments usually come at the end of at a certain set of regulations. True. Absolutely true. Taslim Ahmed, will Russell beat Hamilton this season? It's too early to say. I mean, Lewis Hamilton currently is how many points clear? Is it 10 points clear? Let me look. No, it's actually 20 points clear. Obviously, Russell's retirement in Australia really didn't help, but yeah, it's too early to say. I think it'll be very close at the end of the season. Very, very close. Tazamama says, can you share any data regarding Mercedes, the slowest in the straight? I mean, I will definitely on Sunday when I build up to the race, because obviously normally I go through the speed trap data from qualifying just to show, who had a good top speed, who didn't. But normally, so far this season, when I've gone through the speed trap data, Mercedes and Mercedes-powered teams have been at the rear of the field more likely than the Honda-powered and Ferrari-powered teams. Mercedes don't have the slowest car in a straight line, the Mercedes F1 team, but their power unit is the is the weakest of the four. I don't think there's any doubt about that at this point. Georgie Pop-Up says, what do you think of Tottenham? Shit. Good question. Very good question. Regara says, if I'm going to be honest, I think watching sports on TV is better. You're free to call me crazy if you like, but when you go to these events, you only see certain... you can only see certain things. I think with F1 to a degree is better if you watch it at home, because when you go to a race, it's a lot harder to understand what is actually going on in the race with, like, tyre strategy, pit stops, team radio, issues with cars. It is a lot harder to understand what's going on. And I think F1 is a lot more enjoyable to watch in person if you go to practice or qualifying. But for the race, it is probably better if you watch it at home, to be honest. Josiah says Chelsea getting relegated. Yeah, probably. We are... Let me just check how far above the relegation zone we are. 9 points above the relegation zone. And Nottingham Forest, who are 18th, play us in, I think, next Saturday. And they'll definitely win that game, no doubt about it. My expectation is we'll lose all of our final 5 games and we'll only stay up because the teams below us don't have enough time in the season to the teams that will finish below us, they won't have enough time left in the season to catch us and overtake us. But at the minute, we are the worst team in the league. There is no doubt about that. And I'm serious. I don't think we'll get even a draw out of our final 5 games. And that would be, 9 defeats in a row to end the season? Yeah, it's been such a bad season for us as such a drop-off. Because last season we were, 3rd? And we had 74 points, was it? Or 72 points? We had a pretty solid season for, a team finishing in the top 4, even though it was still disappointing because I wanted us to... my expectation going into the year was that we should be trying to fight for the title with City and Liverpool, but we bottled it in December, threw it away with too many draws, and then just ended the season really poorly, and that just... that malaise continued into this season. But yeah, we are terrible, but we will next season be quite a bit better. I don't think we'll be amazing next season. I don't think we're going to be in the top 4, but I think we'll probably grab a Europa League spot, maybe at worst a Europa Conference spot, but I think we'll be 6th or 7th probably next season. But yeah, we've got a lot of work to do to even get into 6th, to be honest. We need to get rid of a lot of players. I don't think we actually need to sign that many players. I think, again, a lot of the effort needs to be selling the dead wood that are just not clearly good enough. Players like Pulisic, Kai Havertz, even the newer signings, Koulibaly and Cucurella, they need to go. Conor Gallagher, probably Loftus-Cheek as well, maybe even Ziyech. So, yeah, Aubameyang, obviously. There's so many players that need to be sold. I think, yeah, again, a big issue at the minute is we've got too many players. We've got way too many players. And another big, another big issue is that we don't have a way of playing, an identity, and hopefully Maurizio Pochettino will be announced as our manager very soon for next season. He was my number one choice to become manager. I did not want Nagelsmann or Enrique because I don't rate Nagelsmann. I think he is one of the most overrated managers of all time. I don't think he's that good. Enrique, I think, is better than Nagelsmann, but I don't rate Enrique that highly. Yeah, I think Pochettino is better than Enrique and Nagelsmann. So that's why I'm happy that we're going for Pochettino, but it is going to take quite a bit of time for us to turn things around because we need to overhaul our squad quite a bit. Got to watch FFP with all those 8-year contracts. Yeah. So regard saying, yeah, 3rd last season and in 2 finals. Yeah. It was, last season feels like we won the title compared to what we've done this season. Josiah is saying, don't worry, we'll get top 4. United are going to capitulate. I hope that happens. I would rather Liverpool get in the top 4 than United, to be honest. But realistically, I think United will hang on because there's not enough games left for Liverpool to overtake them. I think City obviously will win the league. Arsenal 2nd, Newcastle 3rd, United 4th, Liverpool 5th, and then probably Brighton 6th. Villa 7th, Tottenham 8th. Tottenham have been absolutely shit this season. Anyway, enough of the football. Let's get on to the rest of this stream. And we'll finish off with all of the rest of the teams. Of course, Alpine. Well, what a terrible weekend in Baku. Of course, the setup issues. And by the way, no problem, Taslim Ahmed, who says, thanks, got to sleep as it's late night here. Catch you later. No problem, mate. Great to have you along and hope you have a good one. But, yeah, with Alpine, obviously last weekend was terrible because of their reliability troubles in practice 1. They couldn't get the car set up right for what they wanted, and it affected them the entire weekend. And that's why they ended up finishing, I think, was it 14th and 15th? In the end, which was really poor, considering what their performance has been like this season. It was a very, very poor result. But I am expecting a bit better from Alpine this weekend. But they have definitely been overtaken in terms of performance by McLaren. There is no doubt about that. Obviously, McLaren are ahead of them in the championship. I think McLaren are not just ahead on points, but they're also now ahead on performance. And Alpine have got to now find something to try and get back ahead of them, because McLaren, I think, really from this point on should be the better team. And Alpine have wasted really a lot of points already this season when they should be. Even though McLaren are probably now quicker, Alpine should be quite a bit ahead of them in the championship. But of course, they've blown a lot of points. And yeah, Alpine have just been, I think, quite poor this season with their results. I think they should have had a lot better results this season than what they've shown. But this weekend, they'll be better. Again, watch out for Pierre Gasly. He was very quick here in Miami last year, where he finished, or not finished, but he was going to probably finish in 7th or 8th place for AlphaTauri. until, of course, Alonso hit the back of him and caused a puncture. So watch out for Gasly. I think Gasly will be ahead of Ocon around this circuit. I think Gasly definitely better driver for this track. Ocon wasn't that great here last year. He did finish 8th, I think, from the back of the field, but he got very lucky with the safety car being deployed at the right time. So, yeah, I don't expect Esteban to be super quick. And I think Esteban more likely to be outside of the top 10. So, yeah, Gasly, I think, will be the main man for Alpine. And I think he will be in the top 10 in qualifying and grab at least a point in the race on Sunday as well. Their main rival, of course, from last season and now for this season, McLaren. Like I said, I think they are now ahead of Alpine on performance. Not by a massive amount, only by maybe a 10th or so. But I think McLaren are now, despite still being incredibly slow down the straight, I think McLaren are now quicker than the Alpine team. Yeah, McLaren, I think with Lando Norris, they'll be in the top 10. Lando did qualify well here last year. In 7th or 8th place, I think, for McLaren, and was running in the first stint well, but then I think McLaren got the strategy wrong, and he ended up obviously having contact with Gasly later in the race, and then obviously retiring from the race. So let's hope for McLaren it goes a bit better for them this weekend than it did a year ago. But as long as Norris just, gets into the top 10, I think he will be absolutely fine to grab at least a point. And yeah, he was 8th in qualifying last year, Lando, and then obviously ended up retiring from the race after that collision with the Frenchman Pierre Gasly. But yeah, I think McLaren will be the best of the rest, the 5th best team here in Miami. Oscar Piastri, I am expecting to have a difficult weekend, and the reason is because Oscar has never driven around here before. Of course, he just did practice 1, and hopefully he's getting up to grips well, but Lando, having raced here last year, would have had, obviously, already a decent feeling for the track, and already Lando from last year looked quick around this circuit. So, yeah, Lando should be quite a bit quicker than Piastri here in Miami, and I'm expecting McLaren to be further pulling away, even if it's only by a point from the Alpine team and the teams behind them in the championship. And we'll now just whiz through the final few teams. Alfa Romeo are going to be the worst team. They're just terribly slow. Both drivers have not really had a great season so far. The car is pretty bad. It's not the worst car I've seen in the last few years, but it is pretty bad. Has no real positives. And yeah, I don't see Alfa Romeo really being quick here. They don't have the downforce, and they don't seem to have a great top speed either. So yeah, Alfa Romeo going to struggle quite a bit and most likely be the slowest team in qualifying and the race. For the Haas F1 team, despite Nico Hülkenberg's crash in practice 1, they should be pretty competitive. In they should be pretty competitive this weekend, at least in qualifying. I think this track suits their car quite a bit better. Like I said quite a bit earlier in the stream, their car is a lot better in high-speed corners, and it seemed as though, looking at practice 1, their car already lapping at much better speeds. So yeah, watch out for Haas. I think they could maybe be a bit of a dark horse in that midfield for a strong result. I think Haas have also got a new floor, which might be pretty much the same as what Ferrari have brought. Of course, the Haas and Ferrari cars always similar when it comes to car design, have been for years and still are. So yeah, watch out for Haas. I think they could have a decent weekend. Hülkenberg obviously hasn't started off well, and I think Hülkenberg will struggle a bit more this weekend than what we've seen this season because he has never raced here before. And Magnussen, of course, has the experience of last year where Magnussen almost, I think, finished in the points for the Haas F1 team despite a poor grid position. So, yeah, I think Magnussen will more likely be ahead of Hülkenberg in qualifying, but in the race, I think Haas will struggle, as they always do, with their tyres and with the incredible heat we're going to see this weekend. Yeah, they're going to cook those tyres quite badly. And we'll now move on to AlphaTauri. Yuki Tsunoda, of course, what a season he has had so far. Can he keep it up here in Miami? I don't think he will. I think the AlphaTauri car has good mechanical grip and good straight line speed, which will help him in the, say, middle and final sector to a degree. But I think the issue for them is going to be the first sector. It's just going to be too hard, I think, for AlphaTauri to have good enough speed to be anywhere near, really, McLaren and Alpine in the first sector. And that's really what's going to cost them this weekend. Maybe in the race, they'll have amazing race pace and be right up there. But I think, yeah, qualifying is going to be quite poor for them. Hopefully, Tsunoda proves me wrong. He has so many times this season and has been one of the stars of 2023. And yeah, fingers crossed he keeps it up. Nick De Vries has already had a shit start to the weekend. Already has been, I think, noted for dangerous driving, for spinning his car around and going backwards on the track briefly at a dangerous point of the racetrack. So yeah, not a great start for the Dutchman, who hasn't raced here before and most likely will cause red flags this weekend, given his current performance and also confidence in the AlphaTauri car. But yeah, AlphaTauri, don't expect them to be as competitive as they were in Baku. I think Baku just does really suit their car a lot more than a track like this. And finally is Williams, who I think if it wasn't for Alex Albon's front wing damage at the start of that race, I think they could have maybe grabbed a point in the end. But because of that, Albon couldn't really do much more than what he did. So, yeah, a shame that they ended up with 12th and 16th, I think it was, in the end of the day, the result they got. And that was definitely not as good as I think what they could have got from the race on Sunday. With this weekend, I think Alex Albon will be quick. He'll be in Q2. He'll be fighting probably with one of the Haases, Piastri to a degree in the McLaren, Tsunoda, and, you know, he'll be fighting around with those drivers, but I just don't think Williams have got the downforce required to be in the top 10, like we've seen a couple times this season. I just don't think, unfortunately, that is possible. So, yeah, I think the best I can see for Williams is like a 13th and 17th or a 13th and 16th in qualifying, and then maybe if we get enough retirements they can nick a point. But yeah, realistically, Williams are going to have a pointless weekend and will stay at the foot of the championship. But I still don't think they're going to stay there for long. I think they've still got a good car that, you know, I think the potential of the car will be properly unlocked when we get to the second half of the season. And of course, they'll be able to continue developing this car a lot longer than the teams towards the higher part of the midfield and obviously up front in Formula 1. But there you go, guys. Those are my predictions for the weekend, and I think I'll come to the end of this stream. Practice 2, by the way, if you do want to watch it, does begin in 20 minutes' time. I will not be covering the session, but I will keep an eye on what happens in Practice 2. But yeah, let me just come to the end of the stream and end the poll in chat, where I asked you guys, who do you think will finish third for the Miami Grand Prix? And in a close vote, and with 75 votes in total, Lewis Hamilton won the vote with 40% of the vote, with Leclerc second on 34%, Alonso third on 20%, and not many people going for George Russell, with only 5% of the vote in the end is the Brit. But yeah, that's your thoughts as to who's going to finish in third. And obviously, I have displayed all my thoughts here in this stream, not just about this weekend's Miami Grand Prix, but in general, the state of Formula 1. And please let me know in the comments section of this video whether you agree, disagree, or have anything to add, really, to what I have said in this stream, because I've been really curious to hear if you guys have any extra thoughts of your own that would make great points, as well as to just what's going on at the minute as to the state of Formula One. But thank you guys for coming along. Great to see you all as always. And again, a reminder, I will be back live tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. UK time. That's 1.5 hours or 90 minutes. So it's probably better I say it that way than 1.5 hours, which sounds a bit more confusing. I'll be live 90 minutes before qualifying at 7:30 p.m. UK time. Firstly, for the qualifying preview, where I'll go through all of the data from practice 2, really, which is coming up in a moment. All of the key data as to sector times and who is quick in what part of the track, and in general, how the pace is shaping up for qualifying. And then, of course, at 9 p.m., qualifying will get underway, and the session, of course, will be an hour long, and then I'll do a reaction with you guys to the session. And then on Sunday, I will be live at 6:30 p.m. UK time, of course, the usual 2 hours before the race starts. Firstly for the race preview, then at 8:30 p.m. the race starts, and then, of course, after the race finishes, I'll react with you guys to the events of the Miami Grand Prix. Then, of course, on Monday, if there is anything to talk about, I will cover that on Monday. And just to announce, unfortunately, despite his best efforts, Niblo, my co-commentator, will not be able to join me for the race watch-along. He did try his best, but unfortunately won't be able to make it. But from Imola on, he will be able to make the streams a lot more, and he should be able to make the next, or the first triple header of the season of Imola, Monaco, and Spain. So yeah, he will be back on stream in 2 weeks' time for what will be probably a much better race at Imola, the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Maybe we can get some changeable weather there as well that has happened in the past to maybe make things a bit more exciting as well. But yeah, let me know, guys, in the chat and the comments section what you think is going to happen for this weekend's race. But thank you guys for coming along anyway to tonight's stream. Don't forget to subscribe for that content, all the watch-alongs coming up, the qualifying and the race watch-along coming up. And don't forget to smash the like button, of course, to help this channel and the algorithm. To obviously grow the channel even more, because it does help. And don't forget as well to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5 to keep up with content on this channel. And join my Discord server, link below in the description, for more content like this. But guys, until my qualifying watch-along tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. UK time for the Miami Grand Prix of 2023, it has been me, ChazHD. Goodbye.